Hi, good afternoon. Thank you for joining the LinkedIn Live event. Learn how to manage and protect your business data and infrastructure. I'd like to start by introducing our distinguished guest panel, starting with myself, James Tantrum. Oh, sorry, may have some technical difficulties. Can everyone hear me?
Yep.
Perfect. I'm going to start by introducing our distinguished guest panel, starting with myself, James Tantrum. I'm the Director of Product Management for Rogers Data Centers, where I oversee our co-location, our cloud, our managed and professional services business, as well, of course, as our data protection services. At Rogers Data Centers, our mission is to help organizations realize their digital transformation potential through the adoption of multi-cloud technologies, helping Canadian businesses land their workloads in the right cloud, either on-prem, private cloud, or public cloud, in order to minimize costs, maximize control, always be scalable and secure. Next, Craig McLennan, CEO of ThinkOn. Craig is a forward-thinking business leader who has been at the forefront of technology innovation and data security in both Canada and the US for over 25 years. ThinkOn has grown both organically and through strategic acquisitions, and they currently place number 19 on the Profit 500 list of fastest growing companies in Canada. Craig sits on several industry advisory boards, including Veeam, Hitachi, and VMware, where he helps guide overall product strategy. I'm also joined by Jay Bahar, Client Director for Veeam Canada. Jay is a seasoned business development executive with specialized experience in launching new technologies into untapped markets and a proven track record in building effective go-to-market strategies in the high-tech market. In his current role as Client Director for Veeam Software, Jay is responsible for supporting Rogers Communications and the go-to-market initiatives for cloud data management solutions and services. So a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. Feel free to share any comments in the chat window as we talk and have a discussion today. We will ask and we will address any questions towards the end of today's discussion. So we're going to start our panel discussion today really around the concept of managing and protecting our remote workers and workforces today. So, I think it goes without saying that we've really seen an unprecedented change in the way that Canadians are working, certainly over the last 6 months or so. Back in March, I believe it was Statistics Canada published a report showing that about 4.7 million Canadians shifted from traditional kind of office and work environments to working at home. And of course, along with that shift, we've seen a rapid adoption of digital technologies, particularly in the collaboration space, with tools such as Microsoft Teams and Zooms and Google Meets really becoming commonplace and really central to the way that we conduct business. We've also seen the adoption of really digital and cloud services to allow businesses to continue to transition and function in this new world. And what we find is that suddenly data is everywhere, much more distributed, sitting with multiple providers across many different data centers and locations. And we look at that and combine that with the added challenge that really there's no one currently in the offices for the most part. And so, traditionally, those staff that were managing data, that were rotating tapes, ensuring that, backups were being successfully completed and managed to, their backup schedules, who is effectively doing that, and how are businesses now protecting their data in this new world? And so we'll start with Craig. Craig, what are some of the things that you're seeing in the market today over the last 6 months, and what have been some of your key learnings and insights that you can share with the audience today?
Well, first, let me say thanks for the opportunity to join you today with this event, James, and thank you to everyone who's taken the time out to attend. I think that not only are we seeing a lot of things that I'll quickly summarize here, but we're also living it. We're an essential service as a company, but we also sent all of our employees home in mid-March, and we've somehow managed to add 20% to our staff in that period of time. So I feel like I'm not only a forced expert myself, but I've spent a lot of time talking to other organizations. I would say there's two things that we see repeatedly. First is that sending people home as we all had to do so quickly, has really created a scenario where we've introduced a much larger attack surface for organizations, because now you have hundreds or thousands of employees working from home, surfing the internet, doing things online without the benefits of the corporate firewall. And it's really created a scenario where each laptop is an entry point into the organization potentially, whether it's for malware or ransomware. It's a risk. And that has really started to show itself in the proliferation of ransomware attacks. It's also created a scenario where there are large volumes of unstructured data sitting in these distributed environments that aren't necessarily being properly protected. I'd say that the second thing we've seen is that people have rushed to adopt cloud services. And rush does not equal bad. It just means people have moved much more quickly than they would have in the past. At the same time, there hasn't been great training for employees. So we're exposing the organization and frankly a lot of employees to more data loss and data corruption risk.
I think, Craig, COVID's really changed everything, and particularly the historical mitigation around protecting data was to try and kind of constrain it and keep it within the corporate firewall. And of course, with COVID and that rush to move workers home and keep them safe, and also this rapid sort of adoption of technologies, that's to an extent gone outside out the window. Jay, Veeam is global. You operate globally. What are some of the things that you're seeing out there? What are some of the best practices that Veeam is recommending that organizations take to protect their data?
Thank you, James. Thank you, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. Globally, survey results have shown that 95% of organizations experience unexpected outages, and that's just a fact. And really, the solution that Veeam offers is a modernized approach that creates more recovery points to minimize downtime. When you consider the cost of an hour of downtime can be more than $67,000 per application, any downtime can have significant financial and brand impact to the business, which damages the company's relationship with its customers and causes significant damage to brand integrity. So organizations are backing up their data in the cloud to ensure business continuity. Keep in mind, it's not just the customers who can be impacted by downtime, there's also the employees. Loss of employee confidence sits at the highest third spots. Especially nowadays with COVID, this is a very important aspect, and that there are many employees who are working mostly at home, at home offices, and they rely on data to be always available.
Thanks, Jay. And I think, kind of moving on to, looking at how we can improve and protect remote infrastructure. We've talked about how COVID has really driven this adoption of new digital technologies, or upgrade, some of their current tools to help meet the growing demand from customers that are, increasingly coming across online or digital channels. So something we wanted to ask the audience today is, if your organization has adopted, new cloud-based technologies, whether that's SaaS platforms, collaboration, or even the cloud, have you considered or have you asked questions in terms of, how is that data being protected? Is it being backed up by that cloud provider? Can it be restored? And so forth. These are important questions to consider when we think about the importance of data protection as it relates to really digital transformation. And so, Craig, kind of, I think blending these two trends, digital transformation and data protection, don't they go hand in hand to a sense that, in order to accelerate our digital transformation, can data protection play a role in that?
Well, I think that the COVID situation has been a real catalyst for accelerated change. So there's been a lot of people experimenting in ways that they wouldn't have in the past. I think it's important to note that experimentation can have negative outcomes if organizations don't take some basic steps. So I think more than ever, data protection has become important because it's really the ante, if you will, for any sort of transformation process. Because if you have the proper mechanism to recover data, you're not going to put yourself in harm's way when something goes wrong. It's no longer good enough to say you're ready. You have to prove it. People are asking for proof all the time. So you need good tools that can be exercised frequently to show that the desired outcome is in fact available. And it's really about building a foundation so that, for the most part, you can move faster, take more risk, because there's nothing wrong with taking risk if you have an effective recovery strategy. And at the same time, sleep soundly at night knowing that, yes, I can recover my data, it's protected, and I can get my applications back up. So I think all in all, if you get a data protection strategy in place, then you can actually take a lot more chances still in a controlled way.
Thanks, Craig. And I think, as we think about organizations trying to move faster, but also trying to mitigate risks, Jay, there's been some recent, I think reports within the industry of just, specific organizations that have kind of moved rapidly to the cloud and perhaps have made some of these assumptions about the recoverability and the backup of data within the cloud. And in fact, that's a big misconception, is it not, when it comes to cloud, that cloud itself is not necessarily or does not equal a robust data protection strategy. Can you talk a little bit about perhaps some of the best practices when it comes to cloud and data protection, and maybe some of the examples of data loss where organizations haven't adequately protected their data when it comes to the cloud?
Yeah, for sure. More than 80% of organizations are in the process or planning for digital transformation. So that's there's no question about that. The top challenges for companies pursuing digital transformations, of course, are the lack of IT skills and dependency on legacy systems, and skill shortage to implement technology. Meeting changing customer needs is another big one, especially in light of COVID. So this is alarming considering the imminent challenges of cyber threats. Actually, enterprises predict the most common IT challenge in 2020 will be cyber threats, which includes devious attacks such as ransomware, spyware, and malware. In fact, as you were saying, James, it was just last week in the news that a very large accounting firm announced an IT blunder that permanently erased 145,000 users' personal chats in Microsoft Teams. And everybody assumes that Microsoft is going to protect your data, and that's not the case. Microsoft, is a great company, protects their own platform, but the data is a responsibility of organizations, and a lot of organizations don't realize that they're vulnerable, and they need to protect their data by backing it up. So Veeam has long promoted the 3-2-1 rule, which states that there should be 3 copies of important data on 2 different media, with one of which being offsite. Having a copy of the data in the cloud will ensure that organizations can adhere to this industry standard. And I think that is exactly what Rogers is working with customers to do with their cloud solution.
Great, thanks, Jay. So I think we've made that logical connection that in this rush to transform, we need to ensure that we're taking the necessary steps to protect data. That data protection and digital transformation do go hand in hand. There are a number of sort of best practices. So Jay, things like that 3-2-1 rule that can really help ensure that data is protected and it is recoverable. For many organizations, it really becomes now a question of, okay, we'll understand where we need to get to, but where do we start? And I think, Craig, perhaps if you could talk about, now we've understood some of the needs and the priority and the urgency of having a robust data protection strategy. How can organizations get there quickly? Is this something that could be fast-tracked?
Yeah, that's a great question. So first of all, I do believe there are opportunities to fast-track tasks that may have taken longer than expected in the past. I think we've all seen it over the last 6 months with organizations pivoting far more quickly than they would have experienced in the past. I think a couple of simple examples. You could pick an application that has been around the organization for some time and maybe hadn't considered it to be cloud ready or cloud aligned. And what a great opportunity to actually just go through a simple migration into a cloud environment like what Rogers offers today to gain access to all those operational experts inside the Rogers organization, or even accelerating adoption of Microsoft 365. There's lots of functionality in that platform that can improve, the productivity of an organization. But I think regardless of what you do, you have to make sure that you have the underpinnings in place to give you the ability to sleep safely at night. And, analogy I would look at is, imagine you've decided to sell your house, and you've decided to sell your house quickly for some reason. And you realize that the paint job inside your house isn't really up to snuff, and you need to get it done quickly. Now, there are two schools of thought. One is you can hire a professional, take your time, and sometimes wait months for the professional to be available, or you could rush job and do it yourself and not be properly prepared. But there's actually a really healthy mid-ground, and that is take the time to prepare with something like a drop sheet, do proper taping. And then you can get a great paint job, but you still did it yourself, and you got done relatively quickly. And it didn't require a lot of effort. And I think that's a good way of kind of explaining how people should be reacting to these opportunities, and that is make sure you have your drop sheet in place, have your data protected, know your procedures, and pick the right partners so you can actually trust them to accomplish what you are trying to do.
Yeah, thanks, Craig. I really like that analogy of, there really are no shortcuts, so to speak. To do a good job requires kind of effort and perhaps just more perseverance and essentially, to work harder to get to that end state. Jay, when we think about sort of helping customers really realize that robust data protection strategy, achieving some of those best practices, what are some of sort of Veeam's recommendations to really get there and accelerate this?
Yeah, I mean, companies need a trusted advisor in their digital transformation journey, and Rogers is that trusted advisor companies can rely on. Especially for cloud-based backup as the offsite option and the 3-to-1 rule, which which has become an industry standard, as I mentioned earlier. I think that's where Rogers and Veeam, can offer a great solution to customers. Actually, Rogers and Veeam are offering data protection solutions to protect customers' so to prevent those type of IT blunders that resulted in the data loss of Microsoft Teams data. So as an example of that, this week Rogers launched Veeam Backup for Microsoft Office 365, which is now available to all Canadian customers to protect Microsoft Teams data and much more, of course, not just Teams. And so these are the type of solutions that, together Veeam and Rogers are working together as consultants for the industry to help companies protect their data. We're looking forward to, as a result of these types of webinars, to hear more from customers and get out there and together, help customers in this journey.
Great, thanks, Jay. And for our panel, I think that was the last sort of discussion point. Samiti, we're going to move into our Q&A. Are there any questions on the bridge?
Yes, we do. We have a question from Kevin here. He would like to know if you can suggest a cloud for about 20,000 databases.
Yeah, I saw the question from Kevin in terms of suggesting a cloud partner and provider. And I think, first I'd like to address that in terms of, sort of back to the best practices here. And when we want to move quickly and aggressively, really finding that trusted partner to help on that journey is the first step. And so cloud is not something that we realize and achieve tomorrow. It is a journey that organizations kind of embark on. So when we think of cloud, it's really about understanding the nature of workloads. It's really about understanding those workloads requirements in terms of their need for security, their need for scalability, their need for cost optimization, and so forth. And really working with a service provider that believes in a multi-cloud end state, meaning it's not just one cloud that will fit all workload requirements, but there is really a spectrum of needs, and that spectrum of needs leads us to a multi-cloud strategy. I think in the context of, from a technology standpoint, Is Veeam a technology platform that is suitable for, essentially managing and backing up databases? Jay, you're probably in the best position to answer that. And I think if we could sort of look at that in the context of, Veeam, but also sort of cloud from a data backup standpoint, how simple or how quickly can an organization sort of get up and running with Veeam in the context of backing up a critical database application, and doing that sort of leveraging, cloud-based backup, which of course comes with the benefit of, not just quick setup and implementation, but also with that added benefit of, being able to validate and recover data, at any time to ensure that, in fact, we are able to kind of de-risk and recover that data when we need to.
Yeah, I mean, backing up databases is a very important and very capable feature of Veeam, and so it's definitely there. I think you mentioned that with regards to multi-cloud environments, and especially in the hybrid cloud, environment, what's important to IT administrators is to be able to, it's ease of use, being able to move the backup data from their on-prem to cloud, multi-cloud. So I think that's where, as you mentioned, where Veeam can really help with the backing up of databases in a way in which companies really require the ability to easily be able to move data from one cloud to another and on-prem, and also the flexibility where they can have the choice of whichever cloud meets their business challenges and their direction which they're taking. So yeah.
Great, thanks, Jay.
Okay, we have another question from Hernan. What is the typical cost of remediation for a breach?
Yeah, so a lot of interest on kind of security breaches and so forth. And so I think perhaps first kind of point of exploration here is that when it comes to cloud, security is obviously paramount, and compliance is also an important part of that. So one of the things that we do work with our clients to help sort of understand and ensure that Canadian organizations are able to be compliant to is really any data privacy and data sovereignty requirements that Canadian businesses need. And just as an example of this, when we look at cloud, access to data within the cloud is typically governed by the jurisdiction in which the cloud operator kind of exists. And so one very important concept right now is the notion of data sovereignty, particularly when it comes to the US and the US Cloud Act. And what the US Cloud Act effectively says is that it doesn't matter where your data is hosted. If you're hosted with a US cloud provider, meaning an AWS, Azure, or Google Cloud sort of operator, all US based, your data is subject to US jurisdiction, meaning access to that data is governed by US law and not Canadian law. And where that's particularly important is for Canadian businesses that are required to meet, data sovereignty and data jurisdiction requirements from a Canadian standpoint. And that generally relates to, healthcare and public sector type organizations. I think when it comes to data breaches, obviously the best protection there is security as well as encryption. So I wonder, Craig or Jay, from a technology standpoint, perhaps from a Veeam perspective, what are the intrinsic sort of protections in Veeam that help protect data from security breaches? Because I would say the best starting point is just to ensure that data is encrypted and it cannot be opened and intercepted by someone that is not authorized with the right key.
Craig, do you want to take that, or?
You go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, ransomware, as we've mentioned, and cyber threats, they're increasing. There's no question that companies are going to have to continually deal with those threats. And the way that I would say, Veeam is approaching that, in addition to helping companies prevent it, is to make sure that companies are compliant by constantly and being able to test whether or not the backups are actually been affected. And that testing of that backup of the data is crucial. And in order for us to be able to do it more often and be able to make it easier for the IT administrators to be able to, without incurring too much cost and time, test their data to make sure it's not been affected. We provided a platform, a capability for them to do it easily. And I think that's where the ease of use and the flexibility that the solution provides allows companies to be more capable of preventing these sort of threats and, again, ensuring business continuity.
And maybe if I could add something to that with respect to the question, I think the amount of insurance coverage that more and more organizations are taking as their standard coverage somewhat indicates what the typical cost of a remediation is. We've seen insurance coverage go from $1 to $5 million for cyber risk insurance. I think that tells us a lot. Not only is it about protecting a company, but also the cost of remediation. And something else that just to shout out here, one of the things that Rogers, you've had for some time with your Veeam Cloud Connect service is an air gap capability. So, and this is becoming increasingly important. Anyone that's my age or older will remember why we sent tapes offsite, right? It was because humans couldn't touch these tapes. And then we go to an online world where everyone wants to programmatically touch all data. And what we're finding now is that the best defense may be an air gap, where programmatic access is actually not allowed without a real human having to authenticate. So I wouldn't be surprised to see that become more and more important. And I'd say Rogers is a leader by adopting that capability early in their service offerings.
Great. Thanks, Craig.
So we're almost out of time here. So I would just like to thank Craig, Jay, and James for sharing all these insights with us. I'm sure our audience also enjoyed it as much as I did. Back to you, James.
Great. So I hope you enjoyed today's session. Just as we sign off here, I would encourage those of you in the audience today to sign up for our follow-up deep dive sessions. So there are a series of events that really look at data protection as a whole, how we can protect and manage not just our data, but also workloads from loss and also interruption of service. So for more information and to see what other sessions are upcoming, rogers.com/DC events is where our agenda of those sessions is located. And so with that, I'd like to thank our panel, Craig, Jay, obviously our guests today, for their great questions. And we look forward to seeing you in a follow-up session.
Thank you very much, James. Thank you.